Story 1. For me, I think it's happening right now at 40. I have learned a lot of things. For example, the fact that a job is only a means to an end and it should not take up your whole life. I have also become more forgiving and more understanding. I realize human nature is for people to do what they like and that people do not change unless they want to. Story 2. I am 24 years old. You know when people say, "Oh, I'm working on myself to become better." Well, contrary to some who only say this, I truly worked hard on being a better person. I keep trying to improve and I feel the benefits in how I view life. I started going to the gym between 4 and 6 times a week. It has been almost a year and a half. I truly feel the benefits of going, and it has shaped me as a person too. I work hard to reduce my anxiety as much as possible. I went from having an attack every day to once every couple of months. I do things I enjoy more and have started seeing my childhood best friend more often. I found a job I actually like, and I don't mind waking up in the morning either. I may have found the best boyfriend ever. It is not official yet, but close. I am working hard to realize my biggest dream. It is finally moving in the right direction. Story 3. Around 12, when I realized no one was going to do anything for me, and if I wanted something, I just had to do it myself, was a big moment. Story 4. Somewhere around 27, I realized that other people's opinions of me were none of my business and I should not care. Story 5. At 32, my partner asked me a question that shocked me. How can you love me when you don't love yourself? Now I can proudly say I love myself. I don't need her anymore. Story 6. I went from a nice person to a difficult one as I progressed through law school. Then, when I quit being a lawyer, I became much nicer. Age had nothing to do with it. Life's experiences are what change you. Story 7. A very messy ending with an ex after I turned 29 left me in a sink or swim situation. My choices were to either change the fundamental and overall destructive aspects of my attitude and worldview, or continue to pity myself while ignoring areas of my character and situation that were within my control. I was not suicidal, but my fear was that without a healthier coping mechanism, I would allow myself to sink further into mental instability and eventually accept it as a viable option. I learned the meaning of forgiveness for myself and others. I learned how to let go of the past and learn from it. I learned to identify situations that test my character earlier, so I can choose to do better than I have in the past. I learned genuine gratitude, becoming my own person, being able to mentally relax, and the ability to pursue whatever I would like to chase. I am the complete opposite of the person I was in my 20s. Story 8. I barely survived the sudden onset of a serious health condition and saw my vision of my future fade away. What was left of my childhood ended. I got through the health condition but never regained that part of who I was. Story 9. For me, it was around 12 years old when I realized that adults are not better than me, and I became quite independent mentally. Story 10. Maybe early to mid-20s. I'm 30 now, but in my mid-20s, I was out of control. I went from being very insecure and having only casual friends to dating a guy who really brought me out of my shell. I started doing typical 20-year-old things like being out late, drinking, and trying new places. Good times, but we've mellowed out now. It's fun until you start experiencing weekend-long hangovers and not getting chores done. Story 11. For many people, the most significant change in personality tends to happen in their early to mid-20s. That is when real independence begins. College ends, careers start, relationships deepen or shift, and you are forced to confront who you are outside of your upbringing. For others, it might be a major life event at any age, such as a loss, trauma, or significant success, that reshapes everything. Story 12. From age 26 to 28, I went overseas to work for 18 months. That changed things a bit. When I came back at about age 25 or 26, it was during COVID. I went through a low point, drinking and doing nothing, and hanging out with pretty much abusive people. However, I feel like I changed the most just after this. It was like I opened a door I would not close again, and certain bad habits absolutely melted away. Story 1326. All of a sudden, I was not this shy girl. I was bold to speak my truth and say no to things I did not want to do. I was not scared of losing friends or relationships. I just turned 27 a couple of days ago. Story 14. It was a wild decade that included the suicide of my father, the deaths of multiple grandparents and my aunt within a 2-year period. A divorce, the COVID pandemic, and simply putting myself out there culturally helped me see many things in a different light. I sold most of my guns and became a Democrat as well. Basically, I learned to mind my own business. Other people's lives are theirs to enjoy, regardless of any defining factors. Everyone. This leaves me in a difficult place right now. Every day I have to put my phone down or turn off the television because of some new cruelty or atrocity being celebrated nationally. I try to help in any way I can, but it always feels hollow, like a raindrop in the ocean. Story 15. Late 20s, early 30s, recognizing that everyone is now entering different stages in life. Some are transitioning into new careers while others are starting a family. Grandparents are beginning to pass away, and now you realize how quickly your parents are aging. Everything becomes less fun and exciting as reality sets in. Story 16. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. When I was 15, my parents dropped me off at a friend's place an hour away from home. The same-sex friend and I had just come out to one another a few days earlier and spent the day together. Then his mom walked in on us, and all hell broke loose. Thank God it wasn't his father. I called my mom to come pick me up early, got berated for an hour, and came out to her by running up the driveway and warning her before the mother arrived. She stood up for me with the mother, but when we finally left, I spent the next hour sitting in silence. When she finally talked to me again, it was to tell me that I'd grow out of it. We never talked about it again. I've hardly ever let myself feel real joy in the moment, although I'm working on it. 24 years later, anything joyous feels like a trap. Story 17. About a year after I exited a terribly abusive relationship, the transition was slow. I was tired of being a doormat since childhood and had experienced bad things before and after the abusive relationship where people mistreated me. I decided enough was enough, and I stood firm when I said no to people. I wasn't going to be quiet about my feelings. I have a hard time trusting people I don't know, but I love and deeply care for those I do know and cherish those friendships and relationships. I learned that I needed to advocate for myself and not bend over like I had previously. Story 18. I noticed significant changes at age 12 and 16. At 12, I suddenly shook off the fog of childhood. At 16, I realized who I was and what my direction in life should be. Story 19. At 16, I experienced my first serious rejection from a girl. It was messy because of circumstances and communication errors. This happened 3 months after I had changed schools, and I was having a lot of trouble adapting to the demanding academic level. I did not get along with my classmates. I entered a state of depression that lasted at least 5 months. During that time, I became interested in cinema and watched more than 200 films that year. I also started to write an album and began learning how to write scripts for films. It was a crazy experience. Story 20. I don't think my personality has really changed. Born in the 1980s, I still feel like myself when I was a kid. The things that excite you change, how you handle problems changes, how you treat others changes, but it's still me. I think the body changing is more of a factor in people's behavior. My body is older. It gets hurt easier, doesn't recover as quickly, and gets tired faster. Things that were enjoyable when I was young are less enjoyable now because my body doesn't feel good when I do those things. I don't think that's a change in personality. It's the same personality operating a different body. Story 21. During puberty, I experienced severe hormonal changes that affected how my body processes emotions. I now take medication to maintain emotional balance closer to how I was before. Story 22. Discovered books that were not likely age-appropriate for someone of that age, but are books they should read, along with punk music. Story 23. Approaching 50, I started caring much less and recognizing my own limitations. I am far better off for it. Story 24. My coming of age was around 11 to 12 years old when I became more introspective, mainly because I was very depressed. Story 25. I had a major medication change. I was weaned off of Seroquel and put on Haldol. Before that, I would easily get angered at even the slightest offense and have terrible meltdowns. Since the medication change, meltdowns are rare and I am usually calm. Story 26. From ages 16 to 20 in college, teenagers can be harsh. I was bullied to the point of becoming bulimic. Now, 14 years later, I eat better, but my relationship with food and my body is still not great. I pick at my skin, leaving scars from literal picking. My hair falls out like husky fur, and my self-esteem has not fully recovered yet. However, I can say I am better now. Compared to that person, I am much better. Thank God my partner loves me. Story 27. Around 2011 to 2012, during the time Trayvon Martin's case and the Black Lives Matter movement began gaining attention, I experienced a significant shift in perspective. I grew up in a very sheltered city, Christian, predominantly white and conservative, where everyone lived in their own little bubble. For the most part, I believed that my peers and I were seen as equals, that we were friends or acquaintances. That belief changed completely as I witnessed people I had known from elementary school through high school and college say that someone deserved to be killed, downplay the incident, respond with all lives matter, label similar events in subsequent years as hot-button topics, and claim they had not grown up easy either. They ignored the fact that they were now financially stable, had homes, spouses, children, and were not being targeted or killed because of their skin color. All those years of being referred to as one of the good ones, or not like most black people, resurfaced and began to deeply disgust me. Since then, I have never looked back. Story 28. In general, not just for me, I think the biggest change when people become mature is around 27 to 28 years old. That is the most significant personality change I have observed in myself and others so far. Story 29. From the 23rd to the 25th for me, I became a much less selfish and more emotionally intelligent man. I quickly realized how important my partner, loved ones, and friends are. Story 30. Probably around 25 or 26 when I finished university and started the job I had worked my whole life to do. There are many versions of myself that faded away over time. Story 31. At 15, I went from being a fearful little girl who hated going to the mall to meet boys, but was pressured to do it anyway, to someone more confident. I hated being the shy, awkward friend of the outgoing, boy-crazy popular girl. I didn't play sports, join school clubs, or go to church. I didn't like any of the normal activities expected of young girls. Then I met a confident girl whose family had traveled the world. We talked about politics, music, and art. I met her friends and brought a couple of my other awkward friends into the group. We made knitted hemp shirts at music festivals. Some skateboard, some dyed their hair crazy colors. Some questioned their sexuality. We smoked pot and dated boys when we wanted to, never when we felt pressured to. I never went to the mall with these girls. I started recognizing the issues in my home and the dysfunction. I stood up for myself and grew a personality and confidence. I am so grateful I found my people. Today, we are all just moms in our mid-40s. Those friends, who adults called the bad crowd, are still my biggest support network. We have the best stories. Story 32. I am 23. I would say the ages of 9, 17, and 21 were all major turning points in my life and personality. I experienced a lot of childhood trauma that changed me. Then, I began to overcome it, but adulthood hit me hard, and the traumatized child and the adult kind of merged. Story 33. I think there are 4 things that really change your character, and they do not all happen at the same age for everyone. For me, it was around 30. One of your parents dies. This creates a whole new outlook on spending time with your family or remaining parent. You are made redundant from a job that you deserve to keep. This makes you really question whether you should care about your job. You become a parent. You and your partner are no longer the most important people in your life. You or your partner develops a serious health condition. This really brings into perspective what your priorities are in this short time we have. Story 34. At 19, I started working blue-collar jobs, partying a lot, and getting into trouble. I quit partying soon after, in my mid-20s. I just moved into a white-collar job for the first time in my 30s. I made a lot of dumb decisions at 19, some of which I regret, but it is how I grew and learned a lot. Story 35. Around 40 in 2020. Lost my father and grandmother in quick succession during the lockdowns. Makes you appreciate people more every day. Story 36. Starting from the 11th to the 13th, I shut myself off emotionally from others. Everybody else had their own issues, and I felt guilty talking about mine. Consideration to the point of self-debasement. Over the last few years, I have begun to be more open. Becoming a full-blown cannabis user over the past few months has made me optimistic about my own future. Story 37. I generally had a similar personality for most of my childhood. I became more mature as the years went by, but nothing drastic. However, I realized when I was around 15 that giving up because I was bad at something would not make me better at it. In fact, it was the opposite. So I learned to control my temper. Story 38. It was probably all the cannabis, prescription pills, cocaine, psilocybin mushrooms, and heavy drinking in college between 18 and 21 that did it. Something clicked in my head, and my old goofy self kind of faded away. I've been half zombie ever since. I take very little joy in things besides exploring, eating, and sex. Even then, it's not very reactive. I have to try hard to indulge in the moments. Food is the easiest and most direct reaction I can get, which has resulted in binge eating. I've dissociated. I wouldn't say my smiles are fake, but they are forced, and pain is behind them. I am tempted to do some ayahuasca or something to see if I can reset my brain. I fear making it worse, though. Meditation brought me peace for a while. Good meditation practices do wonders for mental health. Unfortunately, they can't fix chemical imbalance in every way. Also, I had found peace, but I was still a zombie, a peaceful feeling zombie. The highs of joy still eluded me. That was 20 years ago. My poor mother has even commented on it that she misses the way I used to be. I'm not without a sense of humor, but everything just feels so forced. Story 39. At 12, I gave up on trying to be good for the status quo that older generations set. I started disappointing my grandparents. Then at 21, as my brain continued developing, the only real constant was that I was becoming more depressed and angry, more desperate to burn it all down. Story 40. At 57, after earning a Doctor of Philosophy degree, I realized I no longer have anything to prove to anyone. That was the most liberating moment of my life. Story 41. At what age did the most significant change in your personality happen? Started at 44 and is ongoing. I am 46. Story 42. I'm 24 now, but I remember waking up one morning at 20 to 21 years old, unemployed and depressed, and seeing the state of my shared apartment. I felt obligated to clean everything, start doing routines, and eventually graduated to a weekly planner and budget. I flipped from type B to type A overnight. Is it better? In some regards, yes. In others, it makes me neurotic about things I did not care about as a teenager. Everyone saying 25 makes me hopeful that I will get some much-needed clarity. Story 43. At the age of 22, I realized I had been a massive pervert for about a decade. I hid that side of myself during my early adult years, but I had to take steps to prevent it from continuing or getting worse. Story 44. Probably around 23. That was the age when I finally stopped trying to live up to other people's expectations and started asking myself what I really wanted from life. I began saying no more often, cut off people who drained me, and focused on doing things that made me feel alive. It wasn't sudden, but looking back, that's when my personality truly shifted from people pleaser to independent queen. Story 45. Around 45, I stepped outside of myself to see who I was, and I did not like who I saw. Call it age or maturity, but it became clearer to me how others viewed me. I started seeing things from different perspectives. I became more patient and understanding. Not everyone is going to like me, but why give anyone an opportunity to dislike me? I stopped leading with negativity and changed my approach to be more open and positive. I like who I am better now. Story 46. My mom always jokes that I turned into a sarcastic 45-year-old man stuck in a teenager's body. She isn't wrong. I gained more confidence that school year and realized I could make people laugh, so I leaned into it. My sarcasm went through the roof. Add all the 9-inch nails, my hyperfixation on woodworking, and my scoliosis starting up the chronic pain cycle. Yes, I give middle-aged man energy. Story 47. There's a bit by comedian Dana Gould where he said that if he ever sees anyone he knew before he was 30, he starts profusely apologizing. I definitely feel like before 30 I was barely an adult. Story 48. Dad died when I was 9. I only realized the ripple effects later in life and am still struggling with it today. My whole life and personality have been impacted. Story 49. Right now, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor and it really gave me a strong chip on my shoulder. I was lashing out at others with tunnel vision. I am trying very hard to be better, more self-aware, and to soften up. I do not want to be unpleasant forever. Story 50. Father passed away a year prior, and I decided that university was not for me and I would rather work. This experience put me on a different path and lowered my empathy to the point where only what I wanted mattered. Now, at 28, I am much more at peace with myself and in a place where I feel good with a good job. Story 51. Molested at 10. I became hypersexual, traumatized, and stressed. I did not even associate all the bad experiences with being molested because I was so young I did not understand what it meant. I did not know what that person was doing to me. I just knew it was wrong. The second stage was after a very significant boyfriend of mine cheated. I knew cheating was common and possible, but I was not prepared for how, within an instant, all the love, kindness, care, and beautiful feelings I had for this man just disappeared. I went cold. I cheated on him too after this because I stayed due to the memories we shared. I wanted to try. I thought maybe the numbness would go away. I broke up with him the same day I cheated, and on that day I realized you have to be really evil or really dumb to cheat. Thankfully, I have moved away from both. Story 52. At around 11 p.m., I became more extroverted. I am still really shy, but I can hold conversations with people and approach someone if I need to. Story 53. As of now, probably age 24, I am 29. The past 5 years have been the most chaotic of my life, starting at age 24. My brother died when I was 24. I moved states, worked 3 different jobs, graduated college, found my dog who is my best friend. My father died, and I got engaged recently. It has been a literal whirlwind of 5 years with all the highs and lows you can imagine, and that has changed my personality significantly. I am a lot more go with the flow and less stressed. I understand that not everything is the end of the world now, which I did not understand in my early 20s. My 24th year was really the jumping off point for all this chaos, so I would say that was when my personality started to change. Story 54. My much older sister took me in and raised me during my final developmental years. Having a guardian that you can trust, respect, and appreciate does wonders for the mind of a delinquent. I had bad role models and abusers growing up, which led to many negative emotional traits and responses. I was jealous, had an ego, and a superiority complex despite lacking confidence. I was smarter than most kids at the time, which made me a skilled manipulator who used this to bully others, anything that made me feel important. This worsened when being generally smart was no longer enough compared to kids who actually studied. I did not care for others and was selfish for a long time. It was not like flipping a switch and becoming better, but having someone to talk to and help me understand why my behavior was wrong really helped me figure things out. Story 55. From ages 19 to 20, I experienced significant changes. I am 21 right now. This period marks when I left my high school friends and finally sought therapy after years of bullying, gaslighting, and being cheated on by romantic partners. Story 56. Around 24, a few people I knew died around me, and my goals changed from being highly financially successful to enjoying life. I traveled the world, leaving on my first international trip shortly thereafter. The travel further changed me, and I became less materialistic. Story 57. I would say around 18 to 20. I joined the military and was immediately stationed overseas. Living in a different culture and country, and associating with people from diverse backgrounds, really changed my worldview. Story 58. My first relationship was abusive, followed by the mental adjustment of learning to love myself. In the same year, just months later, my grandmother and father passed away in the same week from COVID-19. My life changed drastically. Story 59. Nearly 20 years ago, I was attacked by some people who thought I was Jewish. I am not Jewish. I do not come from a Jewish background. I am as white and Irish/Scottish as they come. I just happen to be not particularly well-groomed, with a beard and long ragged hair, and wearing a woolen akubra hat. So, if you squinted from a distance and had sustained a horrific brain injury, you could potentially see a similarity with a Hasidic Jew. I crawled away from that incident with a fractured jaw, several broken ribs, a concussion, and a twisted knee. It made me really appreciate the impacts of racism and the experiences of minorities in a way that I think everyone should. Story 60. Honestly, around 26 is when my personality completely shifted. I used to want to be out all the time and do things with my friends. I was a really extroverted person, but having 3 children and many responsibilities shut me out of all that. I now prefer to be alone or with a few close people, doing something indoors or somewhere laid back. I am not interested in being out in the crowd. Story 61. During college, around age 21, I developed anxiety that I didn't have before and felt like my new type of personality was off-putting at times. I was more fun and carefree before. Story 62. As a 16-year-old, probably last year or so, I stopped caring about others' opinions as much and stopped being a huge people pleaser. Story 63. I'm 21 right now, and for me, it was at the age of 19. I was always so naive, and at 19, I started meeting more people, talking to more people, seeing patterns, noticing manipulative tactics. I learned how people can hate you and would do anything to hurt you. Recently, I found out that one of my oldest friends, someone I had known for 15 to 16 years, was secretly jealous of me from the beginning. He used to ask me questions to learn about me and the people I was with, and I used to think he was just being silly. He trusted people he had met for only 3 months who talked badly about me, yet those same people talked badly about him. He kept it inside, hating me and telling them they were right. I told him, "Bro, you didn't even have the courage to ask me a simple question." I stopped talking to him, and he texted me to apologize. I said, "Okay, we're good," but I still don't trust him even a bit. Now I'm just watching him, noticing patterns in his behavior, and I do not care about him at all. You never know who hates you. It can be anyone. Story 64. 30. Moved to another country. Met many people from every culture and background. Learned a lot about being forgiving. Story 65. 3. When the violence threshold was crossed against me, and 36. When I finally did something significant for no other reason than I decided it would be nice and travel to Norway by myself. I felt like I recaptured the person I was becoming before the non-sexual abuse started. Story 66. Lost my mother at 21. That completely changed me. Became a father at 32. That was the moment when I stopped caring about work, money, and similar things. My mission in life is making lifelong memories, ensuring my wife and daughter are well cared for, and staying in touch with my closest friends. Story 67. 24. The year I became a parent. I had to do a lot of growing up that year because I had a small human to take care of and could no longer make things just about myself. Story 68. In 1999, during 5th grade, I saw 2 dogs mating. After that, I became hypersexual to the detriment of my studies and everything else. Today, we would call it addiction. Before then, I was a straight A student. People at my school and neighbors at home used to say I would probably go join the National Aeronautics and Space Administration or something similar. But now, I am unemployed and living off past investments. Somehow, I got lucky that my parents are supporting me with some expenses. Story 69. Around 19 or 20, I decided I was done being a doormat or letting people drag me down. I learned how to set boundaries, be more confident in myself, manage my depression, and refuse to surround myself with bad friends anymore. Life significantly improved, and I am now very determined to keep my peace. It has made me a much better person overall, and I have noticed that people tend to like me more as well. Story 70. I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and finally found my voice. I became very vocal and somewhat annoying. Feel free to ask about cerebral palsy. I love educating people about it. Story 71. My late 30s marked a significant shift for me. It was probably the time when I began to feel like a real adult and understood that my decisions could impact others in a meaningful way. Story 72. Right around 30. I lost everything in the financial crash. I lost my condominium and moved in with an uncle to get back on my feet. My vehicle was repossessed on my birthday, and I went through a huge breakup due to infidelity. It took a very long time to recover. It honestly broke the person I used to be, and I am still very afraid of it all happening again. I have a hard time not catastrophizing everything and often find myself very pessimistic about the future in general. Story 73. For me, 29 years old, a stage 4 cancer diagnosis at such a young age will change anyone. 10 years later, I am still here. Story 74. I cannot pinpoint a single major event that shaped who I am today. There are too many to choose from. I will say age 14 because that is when psychosis began, but I recovered from that. Then 18 when I recovered fully. However, I do not act like I did at 18. Perhaps 20 when I was homeless, but I overcame those homeless habits. Or 21 when I entered a severely abusive relationship. I still hold on to some habits developed during that time, even when no abuse is occurring. So, I suppose 21 is the most accurate. Story 75. Very specific events led to being stripped of everything except a few people's love. It has been a full year now, and the love of the few has been enough. I am socially anxious and awkward, but that has nothing to do with the people left standing. Story 76. So far in my life, when I was around 26 to 27, I learned to discard people from my life who did not reciprocate the energy or respect I put into our relationships, whether friends, family, or acquaintances. Now, in my mid-30s, I have learned that it was 100% the right decision. A small, solid circle is so much more valuable and enriching than a large but weak one. Story 77. I finally had more control over impulses and my personality really settled. I am neurodivergent, and I believe my brain finally developed fully at this time. Story 78. October 9th, 2012. If you had told me a man could change overnight, I would have argued with you about how wrong, stupid, and immature you were until you walked away, intent on never speaking to me again, all while I held a haughty grin as if I had accomplished something. October 10th, 2012, I would have said, I know. Sometimes we are just wrong. Sometimes we have to admit we are the problem. Sometimes you have to look inward and realize that if it smells bad everywhere you go, check your own shoes before you start pointing fingers. Story 79. Lost my best friend to an overdose. We had known each other since we were 7 years old, and it still hurts to this day. I am 41 now. After that happened, I made sure to stay in touch with friends, never give up an opportunity to hang out with them, and to tell them I love them. Story 80. When I saw a psychologist about 3 to 4 years ago, they taught me a lot about self-confidence and healthy boundaries. I was very much a weak-willed person, more ready to roll over and cover my head than fight back. But they taught me how to stand up for myself and feel my own 2 feet under me, to have some independence and trust in myself. It helped me a lot, though my ex absolutely despised the change since I was no longer as easy to push over. It turned out that change was enough for him to think I didn't love him anymore, when I loved him all the same. I had just begun to love him in a healthy way instead of being codependent. But for his codependency, that felt like the end of the world and he spiraled. Now he left me this spring, and I find myself in a new significant shift at 33, where a naive and hopeful part of me dies and is replaced with a harder look at people and what I am willing to endure for someone or believe when they tell me something. I was the type to trust to my core, and I just don't feel the willpower to do that anymore after being burned the way I was and for so long. I was both a mother and a punching bag for most of my relationship. I want to be cared for this time, to find my own inner strength and have someone love me for that, and not just how I meet their needs. Story 81. It started a few years ago at age 32. I realized that I had been conditioned to be just like my parents. It finally dawned on me that my parents are racist, homophobic, and total narcissists. I have always known I was different from them, but I thought I was the problem. Now I know better, and I am still figuring out who I really am. Story 82. Middle school bus rides. Kids were up at 7 a.m., roasting everyone. The outfit checks, breath checks, and so on. I developed my thick skin and quick-witted personality from survival. Story 83. Right now, I'm 45. The change was last year. The main difference is in my relationship with women. I was married for 10 years. Then I got divorced. I met a woman that I thought I liked and treated her like a proper girlfriend. I was always like this, pretty fast getting in love, probably because of some emotional deprivation. She dumped me. I think I was too eager and she felt suffocated. I was pretty upset for a couple of days, but then I realized that I was being dumb and I should follow the phrase that Gang of Four sings in the song Damaged Goods. Sometimes I think that I love you, but I know it's only lust. And it is. I was just dumb and immature to mix and scramble these two sensations. Since then I've had 5 different women. If I wanted and had more time, it could have been 10. I'm enjoying it and don't feel any attachment. I think I just don't care anymore. It is what it is, and I probably won't have a relationship with a girlfriend anymore. Of course, if I find someone who understands my lifestyle and has the mentality to accompany me, I would be a one-woman man again. But it seems that probably won't happen again, and I don't see myself living with someone. So, it may seem a little bit risky and a bit misogynistic, but I don't care. Currently, I'm only seeing one woman and I don't feel the need to be with another. But it's because the sex is great. I don't look at her like a relationship or a girlfriend. I guess it's a bit sad. And to be honest, I never thought I would end up in this situation at 45 years old. But I don't care anymore. I just want to raise my kids properly, be successful in my job that I love, smoke my joints, go to concerts, and just enjoy life. I guess if it makes me feel good, that's what matters. Story 84. Age 18. I became homeless and learned that all my conservative beliefs about homelessness were false. Now, at 40, I identify as a socialist. Story 85. At 26 and 27 years old, I experienced emotional abuse in a relationship that destroyed my self-esteem and ego. Then came COVID, and I worked in a care home where I learned a lot about empathy, compassion, and how precious people in your life are. Prior to all this, I was self-centered and didn't care much about others and their feelings. So you could say it's karma. However, I'm grateful I went through it all because I like this version of me. Story 86. 17 earthquakes, apostasy, first exam failure, deteriorating family environment, and had to live with head friction due to severe loneliness. Story 87. 15 and probably 24. I am 25 now. I am sure there will be more years that completely change me as a person. Story 88. Ages 12, 15, and 20. Developed an actual personality, unlocked empathy, started being more selfish and prone to anger. Does anyone have advice for anger management therapy? Story 89. 24. Lost my grandfather. Life has been sadder since. 27. The man I cared for broke up with me and destroyed my soul. I then completely invested in my dreams. As a result, my life became much more interesting. Story 90. 22. My sister took her own life, and I became a very unhinged and unstable person. 25. My brain developed and I began to mature and seek help for myself. Story 91. At the ages of 22 and 24, I lost all hope for everything at 22. I was numb both physically and mentally emotionally. I didn't want to exist anymore. I wasn't actively seeking death but would have welcomed it with open arms. At 24, I found someone who loves me. I felt happy for the first time in as long as I can remember. I genuinely had purpose again. I didn't feel emotionally numb all the time. Since then, I wanted to be better for them. I have lost a lot of weight. I have developed great habits, worked hard every day, started saving money, and become better. I finally feel good about who I am. I would be in a much worse place if I hadn't met them. Story 92. I moved from relationship to relationship from the age of 17 up to 33. I found it extremely difficult to be alone. Even when I wasn't in an official relationship, I was emotionally attached to someone in some type of situationship. All of these interactions were extremely toxic, and some even led me into legal trouble. During my last relationship, I began going to therapy. This ultimately gave me the strength needed to end the relationship and finally take some much-needed time for myself. That was 2 years ago, and the peace I have experienced from being single is remarkable. I have discovered new interests, and my life as a whole has improved dramatically. I wish I had sought therapy sooner, but better late than never. Story 93. From the 24th to the 25th of 2020, COVID-19 and the isolation affected me with mental and physical health issues. I went from being a very social, happy, and healthy person to a shadow of that. I have been slowly adapting and rebuilding a good life since then, but I will always feel like a part of me is missing. Story 94. When I was around 9 or 10, my father became more controlling, dismissive, and judgmental in a negative way. My mother did not help. She only told me that men are like that. I became very quiet and closed off after that. I stopped telling my parents things and did not ask for help because I knew they would not do it. I only realized how bad it got when I became so stressed about asking my mother to tell my father to get me more yarn. I thought he would say no because it was expensive. He did get me the yarn, but only after my mother convinced him. Another time, when my earbuds broke, I just accepted it because my father acts like anything he buys me is a favor or a waste. Story 95. At 20 years old, I became more responsible, charismatic, social, serious, and respected. Last year, I learned many things, especially how to control my emotions. I met new, wonderful people. I started earning more money. I fell in love with the city where I currently live, along with my sister. Although my parents are far away, I will spend this Christmas with them. Everything has been incredible. This personality change is magnificent. Story 96. I had an extremely introverted personality until I was 17 or 18, and it was during that year that I said, I want to be cool. I thought about it for a couple of minutes and realized that every cool person I ever saw or knew, regardless of their differences, had one thing in common. They didn't care what anyone else thought of them. So that's what I did. I even did the movie cool guy thing and sat at the table with the emo/goth girl that nobody ever sat with and tried to talk to her. A couple of weeks later, my friends were sitting at that table. A couple of months later, all the alternative kids were sitting there. A few months after that, all the girls at the table were close with her, and she became my girlfriend. I manifested a change in all those people's lives, some significant, literally just because I tried not to care what anyone else thought of me. It was a powerful lesson, and now I'm generally the most well-liked person among the people I know. The number one thing people say they admire about me is that I'm my own person, and I just do what I want to do. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.